Adam, I have incredible news. I'm pregnant. We're finally going to be parents. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow, but not for the reasons Lena intended. She stood in the center of our kitchen, framed by the morning light, looking like a portrait of pure, unadulterated joy. She was vibrating with excitement, her hands pressed against her stomach as if she were already shielding a life within. For any other husband, this would have been the pinnacle of a decade-long climb. We had spent years in the trenches of fertility clinics, mourning failed cycles and empty cradles. But as I sat there, my fingers frozen over my laptop, I didn't feel like a father. I felt like a man watching a very expensive, very elaborate lie unfold in high definition. Adam, why are you just sitting there? Her laugh was bright, almost musical, yet it grated against my nerves like sandpaper. She rushed toward me, her silk robe billowing, her eyes wide and shimmering. Did you hear me? It's a miracle! After all the doctors said about my egg count, we did it. We're finally going to have our baby. I slowly looked up from the screen. I'm a software engineer. My entire existence is built on the foundation of binary logic. A thing is either true or it is false. There is no miracle in a closed system that hasn't received any input. A miracle, I repeated, my voice sounding hollow in the quiet room. Yes. Can you believe it? She reached for my hands, her face glowing with a radiance that felt scripted. Actually, Lena, I can't, I said, pulling my hands back and resting them flat on the cold marble of the island. I'm having a hard time with the math, because according to my logs, you haven't let me touch you in 6 months. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it disguises itself as a miracle. If you've ever felt that gut-wrenching moment where the truth and the lie collide, hit that like button and subscribe to follow Adam's journey. Does this resonate with you? Let us know in the comments. We're reading every one. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a structural collapse. The excited mask didn't slip, it shattered. Lena's shoulders went rigid, and that luminous glow in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp defensiveness that I recognized from her high-stakes negotiations. How can you say that? She hissed, her voice dropping the melodic lilt. I'm giving you the best news of our lives, and you're bringing up intimacy? You're obsessed with numbers, Adam. You're a robot. I'm a man who knows how to count, Lena, I countered, standing up slowly. I felt a strange, icy calm washing over me, the kind of clarity that comes when you finally find the bug that's been crashing the system for months. You moved into the guest room in May. You've been working late at the Grand Estate 4 nights a week. We haven't shared a bed in over 180 days, so let's stop the performance. Who is the father? She didn't cry. She didn't deny it with the fury of an innocent woman. Instead, she grabbed her designer bag, her knuckles white against the leather. I won't stay here and be interrogated, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and something that looked suspiciously like contempt. I thought you were a husband. I didn't realize I was married to an auditor. I'm going to the office. The front door slammed, the sound echoing through the house I had worked so hard to provide for her. I sat back down and opened a blank spreadsheet. My heart was a dull ache, but my mind was already beginning to map out the investigation. I didn't need a miracle. I needed the truth, and I knew exactly which logs to check first. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder in the wake of the slamming door, a mechanical drone that filled the void Lena had left behind. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the grain of the mahogany until the patterns began to swim. In my world, we have a term called bit rot, the slow, almost imperceptible decay of data over time, until a file becomes unreadable. That was my marriage, a slow, quiet corruption I had ignored because it was easier than facing a total system failure. But the miracle pregnancy was the fatal exception error. It was the moment the software crashed so hard the screen went black. I opened my laptop. My hands were steady, a stark contrast to the hollow thudding in my chest. I didn't start by looking at her social media or checking our shared bank accounts. I started with the router logs. Most people don't realize that a house has a memory. Every time a phone connects to the Wi-Fi, Every time a smart light is toggled via an app, it leaves a timestamp. I began to cross-reference the logs of our home security system with the late nights Lena claimed she spent at the office. July 14th, she said she was closing a deal until midnight. The garage door sensor logged her car returning at 3:14 a.m. August 22nd, she was supposedly at a realtors convention in Chicago, but her Peloton account logged a workout at 9 a.m. that morning. Our home IP address was the one that hit the server. She had never left the city. She had been here in this house while I was away on a business trip, likely with someone else in our bed. The deeper I dug, the more the spreadsheet grew. It was a map of a life I didn't recognize. I found the name again, Tyler Grant. He wasn't just a client. He was everywhere. He was the like on every single one of her Instagram posts within seconds of her uploading. He was the tagged teammate in her stories about luxury staging. I pulled up his profile. He was younger than me, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of aggressive, gym-honed physique and whitened smile that felt like it belonged on a billboard. He was everything I wasn't. I was a man of quiet rooms and complex code. He was a man of high fives and protein shakes. Then I saw it. A photo posted 3 weeks ago. He was standing on the balcony of a penthouse listing, one Lena had told me she was struggling to sell. The caption read, "Closing deals and making moves. Couldn't do it without my partner in crime." In the reflection of the glass door behind him, I could see a woman holding the phone. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan, the same one she had been wearing this morning when she told me she was pregnant. A wave of nausea hit me, cold and sharp. I leaned back in my chair, the air in the kitchen suddenly feeling too thin to breathe. It wasn't just an affair, it was an eclipse. He had moved into the shadows of our life and slowly blotted out everything I thought was mine. I looked at the pregnancy reveal through this new lens. She wasn't just lying about the father, she was trying to use me as a safety net. She wanted my name on the birth certificate, my health insurance, and my stability, all while she kept the thrill of the trainer. She wanted a father for the child and a provider for her lifestyle, and she thought I was too robotic to notice the glitch in the system. I felt a strange, dark resolve harden in my gut. Lena thought she was playing a game of emotions, but she had brought a knife to a logic fight. I wasn't going to confront her yet. A confrontation without a complete data set is just an argument. I didn't want an argument. I wanted a verdict. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Maya, it's Adam Carter. I think I'm going to need the best family lawyer in the state." "No, I don't want a simple divorce. I want a forensic audit of a betrayal." The following week felt like living inside a simulation. I moved through the house with a quiet, practiced precision, playing the part of the brooding, analytical husband Lena expected me to be. I didn't argue. I didn't ask more questions. I simply observed. If she thought I was mourning the loss of our connection, let her. In reality, I was building a digital fortress. I began by installing a small, discreet recording device in the guest room, the room she had claimed as her sanctuary. It felt like a violation of the man I used to be, but that man had been blindsided by a lie so massive it had rewritten his DNA. I needed to hear the version of Lena that didn't have to perform for me. I also set up a secondary location tracker on our shared car. Every time she told me she was heading to a broker's open house, I watched a small red dot on my second monitor settle into a quiet residential street 2 miles from the gym where Tyler Grant worked. It was on a Thursday evening, while the rain lashed against the windows of my home office, that the first real crack in her story emerged. I was wearing my noise-canceling headphones, ostensibly working on a back-end migration, but the audio feed from the guest room was piped directly into my left ear. Bot bar. I heard the door to the guest room click shut. Then, the rustle of clothing and the familiar chime of a FaceTime call connecting. "Hey, babe," Lena's voice came through the speaker, but it wasn't the voice she used with me. It wasn't the professional, realtor, or the radiant, expectant mother. It was soft, girlish, and laced with a desperate kind of hunger. "I did it," I told him. There was a pause, then a muffled male voice. "Tyler." "And? Did the robot malfunction?" Lena laughed, a sound that felt like a serrated blade across my skin. "He did exactly what I thought he'd do. He started doing math. He's suspicious, of course, but he's so stuck in his head he won't actually do anything. He's too afraid of the mess. By the time the first ultrasound comes around, I'll have him convinced it was just a stress-induced lapse in his memory. He wants a kid so bad, Ty, he'll believe the lie because he has to. Burr, and the plan? Tyler asked. The plan is the same, Lena said, her tone turning businesslike. We keep the grant listing as our home base. I'll keep Adam tethered until the paternity is legally established under his name. Once the ink is dry and the support is locked in, I'll file. He'll be so deep in his fatherly duties he'll give me whatever I want just to keep the peace. We just have to be patient. I sat perfectly still. My hands were cold, but my head was burning. She wasn't just having an affair, she was engineering a long con. She was planning to use my desire for a family, the very thing that had nearly broken me during the IVF years, as a weapon to bleed me dry. She was going to name another man's child after my father and ask me to pay for the privilege. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't storm down the hallway. Instead, I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Evidence Alpha. I saved the audio file, backed it up to 3 different cloud servers, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who finally saw the prey step into the light. She thought I was afraid of the mess. She didn't realize that as an engineer, I'm trained to clean up messes. You find the corrupted sector, you isolate the virus, and you purge the system. The next morning, I met Maya Reynolds in a nondescript coffee shop across town. I handed her a thumb drive. Is this enough? I asked. Maya, a woman whose eyes had seen every shade of human depravity in the family court system, plugged it into her tablet and listened for 3 minutes. She looked up at me, a grim professional smile on her face. Adam, she said, this isn't just enough. This is a funeral. Now let's talk about how we're going to bury her. The following 2 weeks were a study in absolute agonizing discipline. I shared meals with a woman who was actively plotting my financial and emotional ruin. I watched her hand move to her stomach in that practiced maternal gesture, and I felt nothing but a cold clinical detachment. To Lena, I was the same predictable Adam, a bit quieter perhaps, but still the reliable, logical anchor she could manipulate. She had no idea that every time she left the room, I was syncing files to Maya's secure server. The grant listing became the center of my focus. Through the GPS data and the recording, I discovered that Tyler wasn't just her lover. He was her business partner in a series of off-book transactions. They were skimming commissions, moving money into an account I hadn't known existed. Lena was preparing her nest, and she was building it with my straw. Maya called me on a Tuesday. We have the bank records, Adam, and I've secured a court order for a prenatal paternity test, though we'll save that for the grand finale. It's time to stop collecting and start executing. How do you want to do this? I want her to think she's winning until the very second the floor disappears, I said. The confrontation didn't happen in a fit of rage. It happened on a Friday evening, the air thick with the smell of the pot roast Lena had made. A peace offering, or perhaps just another layer of the happy home facade. She was pouring a glass of sparkling cider, her eyes bright with that same artificial radiance. I was thinking about the nursery, Adam, she said, leaning against the counter. I think the guest room would be perfect. We can strip the wallpaper, maybe do a soft gray, something calming. For I didn't look up from my plate. The guest room? That's where you take your FaceTime calls with Tyler, isn't it? I imagine the acoustics are quite good for plotting fraud. The silence that followed was so absolute, it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Lena didn't drop the bottle. She held it with white-knuckled intensity, her body turning into a statue of ice. What did you just say? Her voice was a ghost of itself. I said the acoustics are good, Lena. Especially for the part where you called me a robot and discussed how you were going to tether me to a child that isn't mine for the next 18 years. I finally looked up. I wasn't angry. I was empty. The gray wallpaper is a nice touch, though. Very neutral for a house that's about to be sold. Adam, you're hallucinating. You're stressed. You've always had these trust issues. Stop, I said, the word cutting through her desperate pivot like a scalpel. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. I pressed play. He'll believe the lie because he has to. Lena's voice echoed through the kitchen, tinny but unmistakable. Once the ink is dry and the support is locked in, I'll file. Lena's face didn't just go pale, it turned gray. The bottle finally slipped, shattering on the tile, cider and glass shards spraying across her expensive rug. She didn't move to clean it. She just stared at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. I've already moved my primary accounts, I said, my voice steady. I've spoken to the firm. I know about the side account with Tyler. I know about the seminars in the city. And most importantly, Lena, I know that child is the result of a 6-month affair, not a miracle. Adam, please, she whispered, her voice finally breaking. The mask was gone. The charismatic realtor was dead, and in her place was a woman who realized she had played her hand too early against a man who saw every card. I was scared. We were drifting. Tyler, he was just there. But I want this family with you. I can make it right. You can't debug a lie this deep, Lena. The source code is rotten. I stood up and pushed my chair in. You have 1 hour to pack a bag. After that, the locks are being changed. You can stay at the Grant listing. I hear it's a very high-end property. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her cider and her secrets. As I climbed the stairs, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't the joy she had faked, but it was something real. For the first time in 6 months, I could breathe. The battle wasn't over. The legal war was just beginning. But the infection had been isolated. Now it was time to purge. The following weeks were a blur of fluorescent lights, mahogany conference tables, and the dry, papery scent of legal affidavits. If the kitchen confrontation had been the crash, the legal process was the agonizingly slow recovery of a corrupted hard drive. I spent more time in Maya Reynolds' office than I did in my own home. Maya was a shark in a silk suit. She didn't offer me platitudes or tell me everything would be fine. She showed me spreadsheets and case law. She looked at the evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the GPS logs, the bank statements, with the clinical eye of a diamond appraiser. She's going to fight Adam, Maya told me, leaning back in her leather chair. Lena's brand is her reputation. If she admits to paternity fraud and embezzlement of commissions, her career in luxury real estate is over. She's going to double down on the Adam as the father narrative to save her skin and her bank account. How? I asked. The dates don't work. The biology is impossible. She'll claim a reconciliation night you conveniently forgot, Maya said. She'll claim you're being emotionally abusive and trying to disown your own child out of spite. In the eyes of the court, the husband is often presumed to be the father unless proven otherwise. We need to be surgical. The first hearing was a cold affair. Lena showed up in a conservative navy dress, her hair pulled back in a soft bun, looking every bit the wronged pregnant wife. She sat across the aisle from me, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he specialized in aggressive mudslinging. She wouldn't look at me, but I could see the slight tremble in her hands. Her lawyer opened with a performance that would have made a playwright weep. He spoke of our long struggle with infertility, of the miracle that had finally arrived, and of the cruel, calculating husband who was using his technical skills to gaslight a pregnant woman because he couldn't handle the emotional weight of fatherhood. I sat there, stone-faced. I watched the judge, a woman named Miller who had a face like carved granite. She listened to the accusations of my surveillance and my coldness without moving a muscle. Then it was Maya's turn. "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice calm and resonant, "we aren't here to discuss feelings or miracles. We are here to discuss data. We have filed a motion for a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. Furthermore, we have evidence of a secondary bank account held by Mrs. Carter and a Mr. Tyler Grant, into which over $200,000 in diverted commissions have been deposited over the last 8 months. I saw the color drain from Lena's lawyer's face. He whispered something hurried to Lena, who suddenly looked very small in her expensive chair. The respondent claims this is his child, Maya continued. Yet we have audio of the petitioner discussing, and I quote, tethering my client to a child she knows is not his in order to secure a financial future with her partner in crime. The judge looked at Lena, then at the thick binder of evidence Maya had placed on the bench. "Mrs. Carter," Judge Miller said, her voice dropping an octave, "you have 30 seconds to tell me if you want to contest the motion for a DNA test. If you contest and the test comes back negative, I will consider your initial filings to be a bad faith attempt at fraud. Do you understand the implications? Lena looked at me then. For a brief second, the mask of the ambitious realtor and the radiant mother vanished. I saw the girl she used to be, the one who was always running from her own shadows. She looked at her lawyer, who barely nodded. We will not contest the test, Lena whispered. As we walked out of the courtroom, the air in the hallway felt electric. Tyler Grant was standing by the elevators, leaning against the wall with a cocky grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. When he saw me, the grin vanished. He looked like a man who had realized the robot he'd been mocking had just dismantled his entire life. I didn't say a word to him. I didn't need to. The logic was unfolding exactly as I had programmed it. The infection was being purged, and for the first time in years, the future didn't look like a series of errors. It looked like a blank screen. The DNA results didn't arrive with a fanfare. They arrived as a PDF attachment in my inbox on a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't open it immediately. I sat on the porch of the house that had become a museum of my mistakes, watching the sun dip behind the tree line. I already knew what the document said. The miracle was a biological impossibility, a sequence of nucleotides that shared no common ground with my own. When I finally clicked the link, the numbers were stark. 0% probability of paternity. It was the most beautiful zero I had ever seen. It was the definitive proof that the tether Lena had tried to wrap around my throat was made of smoke. The final settlement meeting took place in a small, windowless room at the courthouse. The atmosphere had shifted. Lena's lawyer no longer spoke of miracles or emotional cruelty. He spoke in the hushed, hurried tones of a man trying to minimize a catastrophe. Lena sat across from me, her eyes shadowed, her skin sallow. The glow was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of a reputation in free fall. My client is prepared to waive all claims to the marital home, her lawyer began, his voice flat. In exchange, we ask for a non-disclosure agreement regarding the financial inconsistencies in the paternity results. Maya leaned forward, her smile as sharp as a razor. We don't do non-disclosures for fraud. Your client diverted $200,000 of marital assets into an account with her lover. That's not a financial inconsistency. That's a felony waiting to happen. We want the home, the full return of the diverted funds, and a signed affidavit admitting to the paternity fraud to ensure my client is never held liable for a cent of child support. Lena looked up, her voice a ragged whisper. You're going to leave me with nothing, Adam. After 10 years? I'm leaving you with exactly what you brought into this house, Lena, I said. The truth. You're the one who decided it wasn't enough. The pen scratched against the paper with a finality that felt like a long overdue reboot. When the signatures were dry, Maya shook my hand. Lena stayed in the room, her head in her hands, as if she were waiting for a script change that was never coming. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. I went straight back to the house and called a real estate agent, not Lena, but a competitor she had spent years trying to outperform. List it, I told her. Everything goes. I want the house staged, sold, and closed within 30 days. Don't leave a single piece of furniture behind. The process of purging the house was cathartic. I watched movers carry out the sofa where we had discussed names for a child that never existed. I watched them pack up the guest room. The gray wallpaper she had wanted was never going to happen now. By the end of the month, the house was an empty shell of white walls and echoes. On the final night, I stood in the middle of the vacant living room. My footsteps sounded hollow on the hardwood. I looked at the kitchen island, the site of the reveal that had started this entire chain reaction. It was just a piece of stone now, no longer a stage for a lie, just an object in a room. I checked my phone. A message from the bank confirmed the wire transfer from the house sale. I was liquid, I was free, I was single. And for the first time, I wasn't looking for a bug to fix. I was looking at a blank page of code, waiting for the first line of a new program. I picked up my laptop bag, walked out the front door, and locked it behind me. I didn't look back. I had spent 6 months deconstructing a tragedy. Now, I was ready to build something that actually functioned. The silence of my new apartment was different from the silence of the house. In the house, the quiet had been a thick, suffocating blanket, hiding whispers and unsaid truths. Here, on the 12th floor overlooking the city, the silence was clean. It felt like a fresh install on a brand new machine. No legacy files, no hidden background processes, no corrupted data. I spent the first few months simply recalibrating. I rediscovered what it was like to eat a meal without wondering if the person across from me was calculating a lie. I poured myself into my work, but with a new perspective. I wasn't just fixing bugs, I was building something with purpose. I started a small side project, a secure, transparent ledger for real estate transactions. A bit of irony, perhaps, but it was my way of turning the wreckage of my past into a tool for someone else's future. Healing, I realized, wasn't a linear process. It was a series of small, intentional commits. Some days I'd see a cream-colored sweater in a shop window and feel a sharp momentary spike of the old adrenaline. But instead of letting it crash the system, I'd observe the feeling, acknowledge it as a ghost of an old program, and let it pass. It was during a collaborative coding seminar that I met Sophie. She was a graphic designer with a penchant for brutal honesty and a laugh that didn't sound like it had been rehearsed in a mirror. We were paired up to work on a user interface for a nonprofit. "Your logic is perfect," she told me during our third meeting, pointing at a wireframe. "But it's a little cold. People don't just want it to work. They want to feel like they can trust the space they're in." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't glowing with a manufactured radiance. She had ink on her thumb and her hair was tied back with a rubber band. She was just real. "Trust is a difficult thing to design," I admitted. "It is," she agreed, meeting my gaze with a level of transparency that made me want to look away, and yet I couldn't. But usually the best way to build it is to start with the truth, even if it's ugly. You can't polish a glitch into a feature. We started talking, not about work, but about life. I found myself telling her pieces of my story, things I hadn't even told Maya. I told her about the kitchen reveal, the spreadsheets, and the 0% probability. I expected her to look at me with pity, or perhaps with the same robot label Lena had used. Instead, she just nodded. "You weren't being a robot, Adam. You were surviving a flood. You built a raft out of the only thing you had, your mind." Over the next few months, a slow, steady connection began to form. It wasn't the high-octane, charismatic whirlwind I'd had with Lena. It was a slow build, a series of honest conversations and shared silences that felt solid. With Sophie, there were no hidden tabs, no locked iPads, no late-night closings. If she was tired, she said so. If she was angry, she told me why. Nay, evening, while we were sitting on my balcony watching the city lights flicker to life, I realized I hadn't checked my old logs in weeks. I hadn't thought about Tyler Grant or the miracle pregnancy. The past was finally becoming what it was meant to be, a backup file I no longer needed to access. "What are you thinking about?" Sophie asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. "The architecture of the future," I said. And for the first time in a decade, I wasn't talking about code. I was talking about the warmth of her hand in mine and the quiet, honest life we were starting to build. The system was finally stable. The transition from me to us happened without the frantic urgency that had defined my previous life. With Sophie, there were no grand performances, no desperate attempts to fill a void with expensive things or social status. There was just a steady, deepening rhythm of mutual respect. When we decided to start a family, the fear was there, lurking in the dark corners of my mind like an old piece of malware. But the foundation was different this time. We didn't rely on miracles, we relied on each other. The birth of Olivia changed the very physics of my world. When I held her for the first time, I didn't reach for a calculator or look for a sequence of logic to explain the feeling. She was 6 pounds of loud, breathing proof that the past does not own the future. Holding her wasn't like solving a problem, it was like discovering a new language. A year later, I found myself standing in the kitchen of our new home, a place filled with mismatched mugs, Sophie's sketches taped to the fridge, and the lingering scent of cinnamon. The morning sun was streaming in, casting long, warm shadows across the wooden floor. Sophie walked in carrying Olivia on her hip. The toddler was babbling, reaching for a piece of toast with messy, determined fingers. Sophie caught my eye and smiled, a tired, genuine expression that reached all the way to her soul. She didn't look radiant in a way that felt like a photo shoot. She looked like a woman who was happy to be exactly where she was. I leaned against the counter, and for a fleeting second, the memory of that other kitchen flashed through my mind. I saw Lena standing there in her cream cardigan, clutching a lie like a trophy. I remembered the cold, clinical man I had to become just to survive that betrayal. "Everything okay?" Sophie asked, sensing the momentary shift in my energy. "Better than okay," I said, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I was just thinking about how much can change when you stop trying to fix a broken system and just build a new one from scratch." I realized then that Lena hadn't just been a person I loved. She was a lesson I had to learn. She taught me that you can't force a true result out of a false premise. You can't build a life on a foundation of secrets and expect it to hold the weight of a family. I took Olivia from Sophie's arms, feeling the solid, heavy warmth of my daughter against my chest. She looked like me, the same stubborn chin, the same observant eyes. But more than that, she represented the absolute clarity I had fought so hard to find. Life isn't a program. You can't always predict the bugs, and you can't always prevent the crashes. But you can choose who you write the code with. You can choose to be with someone who values the truth as much as you do, even when it's difficult, even when it's ugly. As the three of us sat down for breakfast, the house was full of laughter and the chaotic, beautiful noise of a life lived out in the open. The trauma was gone, purged by the sunlight and the honesty of this new beginning. I looked at my daughter, then at my wife, and I finally closed the book on the man I used to be. The system was finally, perfectly, at peace.